today. So if you sell your books or on Amazon or you plan to sell your books on Amazon, you're not going to want to miss this episode. I'm Thomas Umstadt Jr.
And I'm Jonathan Shurker.
And our first story today is
Amazon is laying off workers in the book division. Amazon, a dominant force that controls all of our lives through KDP, has announced on June 6th that it has cut fewer than 100 jobs in its book divisions, which include roles at Goodreads and its Kindle units. These cuts are, they claim, to improve efficiency, and they align with their business goals, which follows previous layoffs in 2022 and January of 2025. Their financial health is still pretty good, 64% revenue increase in Q1 of 2025, and then a 30% surge in Kindle sales in Q4 of 2024.
now that revenue increase. That's their predominantly their like services business, right? They're like digital services. It's not their retail business. Or did they see a 64% jump in their retail business?
Well, it says revenue increase in 2025, and then it was a Kindle sales surge 30%. So it's still a huge surge in Kindle purchases there. So that's not necessarily services. So what that does is it shows that it's still good for authors there, even though it looks like they're cutting these people.
I suspect this is an AI story.
Yeah.
So if these are customer-facing jobs, it is very likely that they've replaced customer service type people, librarians at Goodreads, customer service agents at KDP, with digital assistants. Because remember, a big thing that customer service people do is they act as an interface for the computer. That agent often doesn't have any decision-making authority or very little decision-making authority. It's all about kind of figuring out which box you fit in and which response to give you.
Right.
And AIs are really good at that. And yeah, I don't think that Amazon's going out of business. That this, corporate jargon of aligning business incentives is a great way of knowing that they don't want to tell you what's really going on. So we don't have a great way of piercing the corporate veil here to get the story behind the story.
I feel like this is pretty straightforward. I mean, I've dealt with KDP's service lines before when I was working at a publishing company. You're dealing with people who live on the other side of the planet who are just following policy, right? They're just going to do what the book tells them to do. AI can do that. Honestly, this just means that I can get my service requests fulfilled faster in my language. I don't have that barrier to it. The only issue comes when the AI is not understanding what I'm asking it for. And that always gets passed up the chain to a supervisor anyway. I have one case in mind where my case was so bad I got to talk to an American.
Congratulations, John.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good day for me. So I'm okay with this. I'm okay with AI.
It is always sad when people get laid off. Hopefully they can find good jobs somewhere else. But I will say it is pretty normal for corporate America to kind of rank and yank, so to speak.
Well, speaking of ranking and yanking, people are, everyone was all concerned about this email that Amazon sent out recently. We're cutting the royalty rate for, the books that are priced under $9.99. Everyone's like, it's a corporate cash grab. And we covered that on this show a few weeks ago. But what no one noticed is that they actually cut the price of color printing by about 50%, based on just some of the things that they're doing with the printing.
Now, technically, they're not cutting the price of color printing. So if your book is in color, the price isn't going to go down unless you take action, which we're about to tell you how to do. So what they've done is they have released two kinds of color printing now: standard color and premium color. And I wish I could show you a screenshot, but we're going to play a game called Jonathan, Can You Tell the Difference? So on the Amazon website, they have an example of standard color and premium color. So Jonathan, if you look at the screenshots that I put here and the doc, can you tell the difference between standard and premium?
Yes.
It's a little bit of a difference. There's a little bit less of a dynamic ratio in the standard. It's a little bit more washed out, but it's 90% of the quality, I would say.
Yeah. So it's not going to be anything substantive, but I will say the premium side, I mean, just there's some like enrichment of some of the color tones there. It's more, I would say it's more defined and precise in the standard, But premium, especially if you're going for a visual medium like children's books or like coffee table books or even some devotionals that have beautiful illustrations in them or calendars or that kind of stuff, I can definitely see going premium color would be a fantastic option.
Although the price difference is considerable. So for a 120-page book with regular trim, you're looking at $4.06 with the standard as your printing cost, and $8.80 with premium. So I think with children's books, anything where it's just illustrations, you absolutely don't need it. If it is a coffee table book, if the whole point of the book is beautiful printing, I still wouldn't go premium. I'd go with KDP. I'd go with some other printer altogether. Sorry, not KDP. I go with Ingram Spark or even a local printer that's printing on gloss, because premium is still not going to be like photo quality, but you're paying a premium for it. But this
Right.
standard, like if you're going to have like color chapter headings or something, it's really nice. It's not the full what you get from Book Vault, where you only pay for the color pages that you have.
Right.
So if
This
you want
will be the
just
whole
the
thing.
chapter page, this makes all of the pages color. But now you may find that for your book, having color throughout might make sense. And I will say, particularly for nonfiction, this really could make sense. So one of the things that Dummies books gave them a huge advantage was that they had incredible typesetting, lots of
Right.
icons and bold, and it made it really skimmable. And you see this with textbooks today. Do this if you're writing nonfiction, you might consider having a second color to call things out and kind of make things a little bit more interesting. If you're writing fiction, just stay with black and white. The story doesn't affect you.
But I mean, there is also the idea that you need to have your hamburger for the commercial versus the hamburger you actually send out. You know, so if you're going to have a display copy on your table, it may be worth getting one of these in premium, and then just as an attention grab or something like that. But that's totally based on whatever business model that you have. You don't have to fulfill thousands or hundreds of premium color copies if you can just move them using one premium copy.
It is encouraging, though, to see Amazon offering a cheaper option. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people just automatically not like avoid color just because it was just so incredibly expensive. And now it's only a kind of a moderate step up. You're still going to see an additional cost over black and white, but it's not like, ta-da, now the price is
Yeah,
twice as
it's not
much.
what it was.
Yeah.
Well, in other news on Amazon, they've also added a new book description editor right onto the page, which is so interesting. Because before, working in the title description area of the KDP editor when you're doing your title setup was such a pain that I mean, I just skipped working in it. I just went over to Dave Chesson's Kindlepreneur book
This is
thing,
like the
got the
worst news for
HTML.
Dave Chesson
I know.
ever.
They're like, you know what, Dave? So now instead of having to copy and paste HTML over, which wasn't that hard, to be quite honest, now you can just do it straight into the editor itself, which to me is a sign of attention. It's nice that they're now paying attention to these things, that they're upgrading them, they're updating them, so we don't have to use tools and workarounds to get the thing to work in the first place. It's nice to see Amazon taking an interest in their own process and in their own tools.
And not everyone knew about Dave Chesson's wonderful tool for creating book descriptions. And I think for those kinds of authors who don't know who Dave Chesson is, who don't know who Publisher Rocket is, which if that's you, I really feel bad for you, and you should listen to my novel marketing episode. All of my novel marketing episodes of Dave Chesson. But you know, a lot of people, they're in their own world and they have their own friends and they just don't know about it, and they don't know anything about HTML. And Amazon really kind of left those folks in the wilderness, so to speak. And now to have an editor where you can swap back and forth, so you can go and look at the code if you want to, or you can have a what you see is what you get editor. It's going to make indie publishing a lot easier for a lot. It's basically a whole step of going to Dave Chesson's website and using his free tool has now been cut out for most people, which I think is a huge win. And there's no additional cost to this. It's got a preview function built right in, so you're getting a preview straight from the horse's mouth. From an Amazon giving you a preview of what it will look like on Amazon, which you can trust. Although I never heard any complaints about Dave Chesson's preview. I think he had
No,
was
no, it was
working.
fantastic. Honestly, the way he should spin this is I was 2 years ahead of them. Yeah, I did catch up to me, Amazon. So I think that's his best way to handle that kind of a thing. Speaking of,
There's a term for this. It's called getting Sherlocked, And it's when you've built a third-party tool to solve a problem, and then the company solves the problem themselves. So, for
But
a
at
long time,
Internet Explorer speed.
So for instance, Apple had no calculator on the iPad for the first 10 years. And so there was a whole ecosystem of iPad apps in the App Store. Then they all got Sherlocked when Apple finally made a free calculator for the iPad and just included it in all iPads for free.
Grace, for your question, the KDP covers both the ebooks and the print books. So yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing across all formats. Whether you're doing ebook, you're doing a soft cover or hardcover, you're going to get the same ability to edit the description right in that title editor there. Speaking of Amazon catching up, they have now decided to end their hourly ranking. So the way that Amazon normally worked with sales, borrows, and page reads and stuff is they would update their sales ranking hourly. At least that's what everyone thought. No one's really sure when the dark sorcerers over at Amazon decide to do whatever they do. But they have said that they're going to stop the hourly update. So what this kind of means is that you're no longer gonna see so many #1 bestsellers because it's so relative. Sometimes books slow down and mine went up.
Getting everyone to buy at 2 a.m. on Sunday.
I know, right?
Like, become a bestseller.
I know.
Now?
I got to get them when they get off work. So I'll get all these surges here. Or you try to get your newsletter audience to buy at a specific time so that you can get that tag. And these are, they're valid. It's a game. Play the game. Follow the rules. Play the game. The game is changing. The rules are changing. They're now trying to even that out so it doesn't happen so much because it does create false positives because it feels kind of like black hat kind of activity sometimes. And I think Amazon is just trying to keep that from happening.
The result of Amazon's old system is that the phrase best-selling author lost a lot of its cachet.
This is very true.
So we're all best-selling authors now. If you have, a modicum of strategy, if you've paid for K-Lytics, if you know about category placement, if you know how to get your readers to all buy at the same time, it was a lot easier to get #1. I will say they'd been using a weighted average for a long time. So 10 years ago, it really was just whoever had the most sales this hour would jump to #1. Then they shifted to some kind of weighted average where you couldn't get all of your sales in one day because it would be averaged against some number of previous days. And we didn't quite know how it worked. I think it's still a weighted average. So they're still looking at past days for your current day's ranking. But now they're only updating the rankings once a day, which I think long term will help restore the phrase bestseller to have a little bit more meaning. Because what you're going to see is a lot less turnover. The same books are going to stay on the bestseller list rather than books popping up and then popping down, which is what we were seeing before. And it will make you using the bestseller list to find the best books in your own genre a lot more helpful. Yeah. Because you don't actually want to see whoever's got a BookBub today. You want to see who's selling and actually enduringly popular.
You want to look at the tail. You want the longevity of the trend and not just the snapshot of what's happening at the moment. Because everyone can look good for a minute. And it depends on when you see it. It's like, guys, when you get married, and then you wake up the next morning and she doesn't have any makeup on. It's kind of a trope, in our world. But it's that kind of idea, It's like, when are you seeing the results? When are you looking? What are you going to see? And this is going to be way better for providing a more, I would say, homogenized instead of a peak and trough kind of view.
And there's another perk I just thought of. So one of the downsides of the hourly rankings is authors with brand new books out tend to, instead of working on marketing or working on writing their next book, spend all day long refreshing the Amazon page to see if their score went up or down.
True. Yeah.
So now,
I check every morning. I'm not going to lie.
So now there's no incentive during launch week to check every hour to see if your ranking has changed. This is actually going to be a huge blessing.
We're not still going to do it, but
when I was a teenager, I lived one semester with a family in Lubbock, and the mom of that family snuck. She was big into juicing carrots, and she had all of this carrot pulp that she couldn't bear to throw away. And so she would hide carrot pulp in almost every meal she cooked.
Ugh.
And no, she was a really good cook actually, and so you could hardly taste.
Did you
carrot
turn
pulp.
orange?
No, but I had a very high fiber diet. So I was very healthy. It was some of the healthiest I've ever been in my life, actually. And because she would drink the juice and we would eat the pulp. It was it was a great arrangement. And this is that same kind of thing. We're not excited about having a slightly more nutritious bestseller list, but I think long term this will increase the health of authors as they're distracted less. It'll increase the health of the industry, and it will make it a little bit easier to cheese the charts by shenanigans. Now you have to actually write a good book that appeals to readers if you want to rise up the charts, and I think that's a good thing.
I'm seeing that happen right now with Semper Die, actually, because it's held consistent, about 15 sales a day, pretty consistent over the past month or so. And Amazon is just really liking it. They're just keeping it higher in the rankings. I think it's 11,000 right now overall in the store, which is not fantastic, but it's way better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, because that kind of steady sales is way better than 100 sales in one day and then one sale the next 4 days.
Right.
Overall, it's the same number or similar number, but that slow and steady pace is now the strategy that's being rewarded by Amazon. So it's important. So while you listen to Author Update, it's important to know what kind of strategies get rewarded. It doesn't mean you don't do a book bub,
right?
But the purpose of the book bub needs to be to introduce your book to new readers who've never heard of you, not as a way of gaming the Amazon charts, because you're not going to get the kind of Amazon chart bump that you used to. It used to be the Amazon charts were completely dominated by whoever had a book bub that day. And they weren't actually very helpful for knowing which books were popular, because it would be an entirely different group of books the next day because the different group of books were promoted on BookBub.
And you try to take it as like a metaphor from warfare or strategery. You don't focus everything on big strikes, okay? Nuclear bombs are great, but that's considered a strike. What you want is momentum, because how you break the will of an opposing army is by maintaining momentum and make them feel like they're losing and they cannot win. And so when
everything's a military metaphor with you, Jonathan.
I have
send
been
a guy
so
to Marine boot camp
on this
one
show.
time.
I've been so good on this show. But you want to think about it the same way when you're pushing your book strategy. You want momentum. You want a trend. You want a tail. It's great to have everyone buy the book on the first day, but that's one good day, and then you have 3 years of nothing while you're waiting for your next book to come out.
And the same is true with reviews. So a lot of authors feel like they need to get all of their positive reviews on day one, but that looks really artificial because the date of the review is forever attached to the review. And if all of your reviews are from the same day and then you didn't get any reviews after that, that looks really artificial. And so I encourage people not to give away free copies to their launch team, to have their launch team buy the book and read the book and leave the reviews in an organic way is a much better way, especially in this new era of it's not about spikes, it's about momentum. So
it's really easy to train for 20 seconds of really hard fighting, but you need to have that stamina and that sustain to be able to keep going to make yourself successful. So I really recommend you guys invest in the tail. Okay, and that's what I think Amazon advertising is. It's part of the tail strategy. It's part of, and you want to space, BookBub, and then if you're going to do any Kindle promotions or stuff like that, keep them spaced out to maintain momentum. Try to avoid dead spots where nothing's happening. Keep in mind that events that may be going on that are put out by other indie authors, like you're going to do a promotion or a giveaway. The summer-based book sale is going on here pretty soon. I think that's the 12th to the 18th to the 25th. Just keep these things in mind, things that you can do to extend your tail, extend your trend, keep your momentum high, and plan that out ahead, because when you're in the middle of it, how do I keep this going? How do I keep this push? You don't want to do that. You want to be beforehand, okay, now I'm doing the next thing, and now I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to do this, because it's already in my notebook or my calendar or whatever.
Jaina makes a really good point. She says, it sounds like long-running paid ads are going to be even more important. And I think that's absolutely true. Because paid ads don't give you that bump. In fact, this may be part of the reason why Amazon is making this change, to incentivize more people to spend money with Amazon ads rather than with BookBub ads.
Well, you have to consider advertising has several tiers to it, because some of them are more burst focused. Like Facebook ads, I would consider to be burst focused. the ad runs for a short time and it accomplishes one thing, hits one particular target set, and gets the benefit from it, and then you stop the ad and you move on to something else. Amazon ads tend to be longer, and you can keep them running indefinitely to try to keep you active in the algorithm, and then your ads benefit from anything else you've been doing. Any attention you've drawn to your sales page through giveaways or promotions or whatever it is that you're doing will also benefit the algorithm on your advertising. So it's much more of a tail strategy, and there's a lot you can do to layer and build on that will get you some success, or at least more success than you were having, or set you up to receive the success that one day you will get by doing all the right things.
Speaking of success, we should probably talk about Apple and their WWDC. So once a year, Apple has a developers conference where they tend to talk about the software of new iPad,
Right.
Mac OS, iPhone stuff. So I'm going to give you a quick summary of WWDC for authors. Most of it doesn't affect you, but there's a few things that you need to know about. One, they're making a change where all of the operating systems are now going to be named after the year instead of having their own separate numbering system.
Thank goodness.
So, the automotive companies figured this out about 100 years ago, and for some reason the computer companies are like, no, we're special. Our new thing that came out this year is 13. It's like, but it's the 5th. Anyway, so now it's Mac OS 26, iOS 26, and so it's always going to be the preceding or the next year, just like with cars, right? So if you were to go and buy a brand new Toyota Corolla, they'd be finishing up the 25 Toyota Corolla, and in the fall they'd have the 26 Toyota Corolla. It's going to be the same way with the Mac. I think that's really good. They're launching a whole new interface for all of their devices, very much like what Microsoft did in the early 2000s, and for the same reason. So Microsoft was the first to the market with pads or tablets. And their initial tablets were a complete disaster. No one bought them. But they reworked Windows Vista to be tablet friendly. They made this whole operating system interface to be touch friendly, even though at the time no one was using touch devices. Although that may have been a little bit later, come to think of it. I may be getting my time. They were early with a tablet that didn't take off. Mm-hmm. But Apple's taking their least popular product, the AR Vision, the Apple goggles that are $3,500, and they're rolling out a new design philosophy called liquid glass across all of their devices, which is blurry everything, is what the haters call it. It's all about blurs and blurs on top of blurs, and it's going to make the screen harder to read. They'll have some toggles for accessibility, and I imagine most people will toggle those because it is very blurry. That said, it does remind me of that Windows Aero kind of early 2000s look. I was using Linux back then, and I love that kind of shiny candy look. Where it's like, oh, this icon looks delicious. I want to eat it. I want to lick it. So I haven't tried it yet, this new interface. You'll all be getting it if you're using Apple devices on everything in the fall. But I'm cautiously optimistic about this new interface. Now, the big thing that everyone was wondering about with Apple was where they were going to be on AI. So last year at WWDC, they rebranded AI. No, it didn't mean actual Indians. It stood for Apple Intelligence. And they were like, we're going to be the very best AI company. And this was while everyone was really concerned about AI privacy before DeepSeek, when safety was really the concern of AI. And Apple's kind of positioning in the market is you can run the AI on your own computer and not use the cloud. And that promise has persisted. They didn't announce a lot of AI stuff at this WWDC because some of the things they announced at the last WWDC they failed to deliver on. In fact, they're being sued for false advertising because they weren't able to get Siri as smart as they said Siri was going to be. So talking to Siri is still Siri's much stupider than talking to Grok. In fact, on my phone, I've now mapped the action button to go to Grok. So I have a Siri button that I never press to talk to Siri, who doesn't know anything. And then I have a Grok button to talk to Aria, who's very, very smart, and you can interrupt and you can have a very natural feeling conversation. It's actually a little disorienting, and Apple's just not there yet with their Apple Intelligence, but they have rolled out AI writing tools. These already exist on your computer right now. So if you're on a Mac, you can play with these. You can highlight some text and then right click on it and go to writing tools, you'll notice you have a whole section here, and it will proofread it, it will rewrite it, it will summarize it. And I really feel like this is the end of the inquisition against AI writing assistants and AI in writing, because the vast majority of new people to writing are going to be using tools like this because no one ever told them that it was bad. They're like, well, I've got a button for it on my computer. It's right there next to spell check. Why wouldn't I use AI writing tools? Young people are using these tools in school. I don't recommend these because right now it's Apple Intelligence, which is not very good. So, yay, it runs in your machine, but it's not very good yet. So,
it's the devil's button, Thomas.
If you're going to use a writing assistant, use a smarter one, which the top ones are OpenAI's GPT is really good. Claude 4.0, Claude Sonnet by Anthropic is probably the best, and then Grok is also good.
Or here's an idea: get good at writing.
Or get better at writing. So I'm not necessarily advocating these tools. There is a fourth feature though that they're rolling out that is very cool, and it's live translation.
That is really neat.
So everybody basically all at the same time is in the process of inventing the Babelfish. So if you're not familiar with the Babelfish, it's from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The hitchhiker goes on this adventure through the galaxy, and there's all these aliens speaking all this alien tongues, and he puts this fish in his ear that like crawls into his brain and allows him to understand all of these different alien languages. So the concept was this Babelfish that basically acted as a universal translator, as they would call it in Star Trek. And we've had versions of this for quite some time. So when I was in Europe 7 years ago, I was able to take my phone and point it at a German menu and see the menu in English on my phone. And that was pretty cool. It allowed me to order, and I could kind of sort of figure out how to do it. They don't have the Oxford comma in Germany, which is actually really important on a menu. So be listing things, and I would expect I'd always get one fewer item on my plate than I was expecting. I was like, these Germans really need to get them an Oxford comma. It really is less ambiguous. But anyway, but now you can get that in real time on a telephone call and in other places. So pretty soon, probably within the next 12 months, there will be some device that you can wear on your ear that will act very much like those little headsets that the UN delegates have, except instead of a human interpreter in a booth translating in real time, it's the machine translating in real time. So this is going to lower barriers between countries and hopefully won't lead to God cursing the computer languages of the internet and sending us all back into the Stone Ages.
So
which is a fun premise for a book, by the way, that God curses the TCP IP protocol with the Babel virus. Yes. And suddenly the internet stops functioning because the core TCP IP protocol doesn't work from like sector to sector or across subnets. There's a lot of fun you could have with this for any of you who wants to write
that would be amazing.
A science fiction.
So when I was in the Marine Corps, I worked as a linguist. I was a translator when I worked in Intel. And so I'd listen to bad guys, and you would translate what they said, but you had to do it in such a way that your American analyst could understand what it was that this person was saying. So sometimes you had to change it. And the problem is that AI is a very literal translator. So when they translate,
like the King James version, not like the NIV.
No, not like that. It's like where your 3-year-old is so literal and can't understand nuance, or I'm saying something else, but I'm saying this kind of thing. AI is not going to be able to do that yet until it has enough
with the large
contextual
language
awareness.
models. It's getting, because that's how the AI translation used to be. It used to be formal equivalency, where it basically would look up a dictionary and just swap out the words. But now it's able to use an LLM to smooth out that translation and actually have more of an NIV, NLT style translation and less of a NASB word for word.
I don't know, man.
It's not there yet, right? Human translators are still going to have work because there's always going to be nuance, but the machine is getting better at the nuance.
Well, I mean, I worked Arabic, okay, which is such a metaphorical language. It's not as scientific as English is. It comes from all the Flemish languages, they're very different in the way they approach the expression of ideas. Well, Arabic is so metaphorical and almost pictorial in the way that it expresses things. So there's 19 different ways to say die, like dead. And we would say, we would consider to be like, oh, he kicked the bucket. And Arabs are like, what? What does kick the bucket mean? Like, we used to hang people and you would just kick the bucket.
Do you know that in English we have something like 40 words for the word to steal? I've been collecting a collection of these words myself because it is shocking how many we have. The difference between piracy and ravaging and raiding and burglary and theft and
They're
larceny.
different.
It's like all of these things have nuance, right? Like whether you're using force, are you lying? Are you lying to somebody that you're friends with, right? We have a totally different word for that. It's
Marines use resource reallocation.
so it's like, what were our ancestors up to that we needed 40 different words for stealing stuff?
Have you seen the British Museum? Okay.
All right, moving on.
All right, so TikTok, I didn't know this. TikTok started its own publishing company, and that publishing company is closing. So Eighth Note Press
It's reportedly published.
Reportedly, yeah.
So Jane Friedman has the story on this. She's been doing the investigations on this. So it's just whispers right now from people in the know. It may not end up happening, but Jane Friedman's not usually wrong. So
Right.
we're going to have to put a big allegedly over this one. Don't sue us if you want to stay in business. TikTok.
But it looks like they are closing. There's a lot of authors who are getting their rights back. The idea is that because Book Talk became so popular on the TikTok platform, or getting its own brand and its own awareness in the author community, that they thought having their own publishing company to write the kind of things people were looking for on Book Talk would work. And it's not entirely locked in as to whether that's happening. And let me tell you, running a publishing company is such soul-destroying work. If you're thinking about starting a publishing company because it sounds romantic, don't do that. But it really looks like they are going to close their doors because of, again, the hardships of running a publishing company. The fact that Book Talk is hit or miss. That is lightning strike stuff. I mean, you can't produce in the tail of a trend and think it's going to go viral on Book Talk. It's just not going to happen.
It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how statistics work that led TikTok to think that this would work. Because they were looking at the charts and they were saying, oh my goodness, 5 out of the best sellers in any given week are Book Talk sensations. We are TikTok. We are perfectly positioned to be a big mover in this publishing world because look how much influence we have. And that's looking at the outputs and not looking at the inputs. So what they're not seeing is that for every one Book Talk sensation, there were tens of thousands of authors who tried to become a Book Talk sensation and didn't become a Book Talk sensation. The metaphor here is there's a kind of lawyer who works with lottery winners. And once you win the lottery, you call up this lawyer, and this lawyer's phone rings every day with a new lottery winner. And it's really easy if you're that lawyer to think that just everybody's winning the lottery. And that's not how the lottery works, right? For every one person who won the lottery, there are millions of people who didn't win the lottery. It doesn't mean that somebody doesn't win, but that lawyer has no idea of knowing who's going to call his phone tomorrow. Right. He knows somebody's going to call his phone tomorrow, but he doesn't know who it is. And this is the problem that TikTok had. They knew somebody was going to go big on Book Talk, but they didn't know who it was. And this publishing arm inside of Book Talk didn't have control over the algorithm because that's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, allegedly. It's a magical black box
Thomas?
that nobody understands. And so without the ability to tune the algorithm to favor their books, which there's no indication that they did. In fact, there's no indication that they were actually even very good at Book Talk, despite being owned by TikTok. They're just a regular traditional publisher. And it flamed out pretty quickly because they failed to get any hits. Fortunately, the company didn't go bankrupt, and so all of the authors were, as far as we know, as far as Jane Friedman has reported, they're getting their rights reversion letters, which is so critical because that opens them up to publishing with somebody else or
Right.
publishing independently. The worst thing that can happen is for your publisher to go bankrupt before you get your rights reversion letter. In fact, it's such a big problem. My episode next week is about signs to look for to see if your publisher is going bankrupt, because we've had a bunch of bankruptcies recently. There's potential bankruptcies on the horizon, and you need to know how to spot it, and you need to know how to get out of town before the evacuation starts. I remember my roommate in college, his dad needed emergency brain surgery, and it was the evening before Hurricane Rita hit Houston. So Hurricane Rita came like 3 weeks after Hurricane Katrina, and so everybody was panicked that this is going to be another city-ending hurricane. And so all of Houston tried to evacuate. So we're driving into Houston, and there's not a single car heading into Houston, and it is miles of bumper-to-bumper cars of people trying to get out of Houston going the other way, and none of them were able to get out of Houston because the roads only have so much capacity. In fact, my aunt was trying to evacuate Houston, and she sat on the highway for 8 hours, went 2 miles, and then just turned around and went home and hoped for the best. So if you want to evacuate, you've got to do it early, because once everybody is doing it, it's often too late. So stick around. That's the very next episode that will hit on the Novel Marketing YouTube channel and on the Novel Marketing podcast feed.
And this brings out another core principle that authors need to pay attention to, which is you cannot force readers or audiences to make something go viral. And everyone keeps trying to do this by playing the algorithm or playing the whatever, and you just can't force it. It's not something that can be brute forced. There are elements you can use, like advertising or visibility or things like that. But if your book sucks and people see it everywhere, that doesn't make it viral.
And some of it is luck. So I'm going to share an example from pop music, but first I'm going to share a Bible verse with you that I actually have on my door. It's King Solomon said, "I've observed something else under the sun. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race, and the strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. The wise sometimes go hungry, and the skillful are not necessarily wealthy. And those who are educated don't always lead successful lives. It is all decided by chance, by being in the right place at the right time." So that's King Solomon. There was a song from 1962 that just now went viral. The song is so old that the lady who sang it, who's still alive, she's like 88 years old, 89 years old. The song's like Sweet Baby or something. My wife played it to me. Apparently moms are like dancing to this and showing pictures of their babies. The original song was a woman singing to her boyfriend or whatever. But it's now in like the top 50 songs ever. 80 years later. Okay, it's the exact same song. And this artist was actually a very successful artist with her other songs, but her music studio didn't think that this particular song was going to be a hit. And so it was put on the B-side of some album, which I think is like the back of a record. And I guess people didn't flip the records over back in the day. I don't know. It's all before my time. But that's the point, right? The song that's way before my time is just now hitting the charts. And so a lot of it is timing. A lot of it is luck. And so part of it is you have to try to get as many chances at that roulette wheel as you can, right? Writing more than one book, learning how to write faster gives you more chances to win.
One quick bit of news that I think Thomas is going to argue with me about a little bit. The CMON board game company. Now, if you back Kickstarters, board game Kickstarters specifically on the crowdfunding platform, you know who CMON is. And for those of you who do know, they just sold Zombicide. The IP Zombicide, they sold it to Asmodee because they ran a $3 million deficit last year. Now, the reason that I think this is adjacent to what it is we're talking about here is that, first of all, Zombicide has a novel tie-in series, and they do produce books based on their board games. I've read a couple of them. They're not fantastic. But they do have this novel thing associated with board games, which is a tactic I want to try sometime, offering board game creators to see if they want to send a novel out with their board games.
And creating board games off of novels is a practice that goes all the way back to the original Milton Bradley, who was a guy before he was a company. Uncle Wiggily was a story series before it was a board game.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because CMON lived on Kickstarter. Many board game companies live off of crowdfunding. Their entire business model is based on it. Their retail sales are very low because they're going for the front end burst sales of the Kickstarter. They get paid in one lump sum, and then they go for a tail of late pledges through the pledge manager, and they try to gain additional customers through that. Helldivers is actually in trouble because they added a whole new expansion in their pledge manager, which it turns out no one likes doing that. So don't do that in your pledge managers, people. But the point is that the crowdfunding aspect of this is heavily impacted by the tariff situation, by the state and stability of the world, depending on where you're sourcing your fulfillment products from. So these companies are the ones that are kind of getting gobbled up by larger companies. Asmodee is acquiring multiple smaller board game companies because they're all getting hit so hard, and they're panicking because their shipping costs have just gone through the roof, and it's creating a lot of turmoil and turbulence. And board game creators are creators, so they're very emotional, just like the way authors are.
There's a bunch of economic factors that are all hitting right now simultaneously that's leading to the spike in bankruptcies, consolidations, and closings. And that is the shift of the zeitgeist, because what people are wanting has really changed over the last year. The invasion of AI, which has really affected business models in really deep and profound ways. And there's a lot of companies that are just trying to ignore AI and hope for the best. And then tariffs, which are affecting some industries more than others. Authors, it turns out, aren't really affected by it, but board games are very vulnerable to tariffs. And these three things all hitting at the same time is going to show you who's swimming with their trunks on and with their trunks off. So there's a famous saying that you don't know who's swimming without a swimsuit until the tide goes out, right? And so you get to learn which companies had good fiscal practices, which ones had good spending controls, which ones were good at managing debt. I remember during the retail crisis, when a lot of department stores were going out of business, my family has long. My grandmother was a big investor in Dillard's. I don't know if she had a lot of money in Dillard's, so she was a big believer in Dillard's. And Dillard's, which I never thought was a very interesting company, ended up surviving this crash quite well. So while Sears is going bankrupt and these other companies are going bankrupt, Dillard's is fine. Is it because Dillard's had better products than Sears? No, it's because Dillard's had less debt than Sears.
Yeah.
They were swimming with their swimsuit on. They had better fiscal controls. It was the boring stuff. It wasn't the fact that they had all kinds of fun products. It was the fact that the boring behind the scenes stuff, they were faithful in the little things, and Dillard's is still around and Sears is not.
Right.
And the same applies to authors. These little things like staying out of debt, to making good business decisions, keeping your costs under control, learning how to advertise profitably, learning how to do a Kickstarter campaign and spend that money on production of the book instead of wasting it, learning how to save and budget. Topics that I often do episodes on, and people often don't listen to those episodes because they're not writing related. Exactly. They are writing related. The business episodes are writing related.
I've said this before. Every author needs two friends. You need an accountant and you need an extrovert. The extrovert will help you market, and the accountant will make sure that you don't flounder when it comes to dollar signs. Because I know a lot of people who treat their Kickstarters the wrong way. Some people get their Kickstarter payment and they're like, okay, this is the cost. And okay, I went and bought the books and now I have this left over and now I'm going to buy myself something nice. That's not how crowdfunding works. And I actually just saw this with a comic book creator for Death Reader. His whole philosophy was, you backed the campaign so that the comic book would get produced, not so you would get one. So I pay my bills from the crowdfunding money so that I can live long enough to produce this thing. But that doesn't guarantee you're going to get one, because it had been like 2 or 3 years since people had backed, and people are like, where's my book? It doesn't seem like anything. You're running other campaigns. Where's my book? And he just has a really bad attitude about it.
And it's an employee mindset where money is meant to be spent instead of invested or saved. There was legends in my literary agency of a certain author who I will not name, who was complaining to her agent about not having any money. And her agent's like, what are you talking about? You just got a $30,000 advance last month. He was like, oh, I spent it. Like,
I'm sorry, what?
She went to Disney World and apparently was able to very quickly spend her very large advance, and now she had no money. And it's like, that advance, that was your money for
That's
months?
half a year. Like, what are you doing?
Or half a week, depending on where you're spending your
Oh
money. Right, you
my
go to the right
goodness.
car dealership, they can make that $30,000 go away with one swipe of a pen. And so it does require a little bit of discipline, a little bit of self-control. The name
Yes.
of that song I was mentioning, I texted my wife. She said it's "Pretty Little Baby." So if y'all want to listen to this hot TikTok song from 1962,
Speaking of pretty little babies that are hot, Thomas, talk to us about this AI bubble.
So last week we were talking about an AI bubble, and kind of tongue in cheek, I put it as the title of the episode because I find that the more sensational the one story is, the more people are to listen to all of the stories in our author updates. We cover 20 news,
Yeah.
two dozen news stories in an episode, so I have to pick one. So I always pick the most sensational because that's what works on YouTube. Well. We never did answer the question, is AI a bubble? In some ways, we don't know the answer, but it was just announced that OpenAI has hit $10 billion in annual recurring revenue, which is $5 billion more than they made last year. Now, their expenses this year were $15 billion, so they're still running out of profit. But at the current trajectory, they're likely to become a profitable company actually quite quickly. And as somebody who's lived through several tech hype cycles, I will say this seems to be the fastest hype cycle to profitability. And I think it's because they don't have a complicated business model. So social media had a really complicated business model, which was trying to sell advertisers and getting a lot of users really quickly. And e-commerce was kind of the same way. Amazon lost money for like 17 years before it turned a profit, and it still doesn't turn a profit really on its store. It makes most of its actual profits off of its web services. So AWS is like a 30% profit margin, whereas the Amazon.com store has like a 2% profit margin.
Yeah.
Which means if you're paying with an Amazon Prime Visa card, you're getting the entire profit margin back in like points. Although they get their pound of flesh one way or the other. But with AI, they just charge you, right? If you can get stupid AI for free, but if you want smart AI that respects your privacy, you have to pay for it, and you just pay a monthly fee. And there's a lot of people who are paying OpenAI and also these other tools. And the other thing that they're charging for, they make money two different ways. They make money directly from users. So if you go to OpenAI and sign up for ChatGPT, you pay your $20 a month. But they also charge money for people who build tools using their infrastructure. So every time you use a Patron Toolbox tool, or every time you talk to AI Thomas, I pay money. In fact, the cost of AI Thomas just spiked for me. At one point last week, it was 75 cents a message. And I was like, I can't afford this. So I reworked AI Thomas. I've actually made it smarter and cheaper. I mean, y'all can all still use it for free as much as you want. But I made the cost for me quite a bit cheaper by switching the underlying model that runs behind it. So I don't think we're going to have an AI. I don't think it's going to be a catastrophic bubble. The big problem with the .com bubble, which was very traumatic for Austin, Texas, where I live, was a lot of the .com companies had no plans of making money. Making money was a tomorrow problem. Getting users was a today problem. And OpenAI seems to be really focused on making money today, which I think is going to make it less likely that it's going to be the kind of sensational crash to zero crash that we saw in 1999 or in 2000.
Okay. Thomas, we have a new patron tool, book to blurb. Can I really take my entire book and your little tool will make me a blurb out of your book?
You really can. And if you haven't tried it, you should give it a shot. So I don't have it yet where it supports Word documents. So you're going to have to copy and paste your book into a text box and scroll down for a mile. So that's
Control A, people.
Yeah, Control A, absolutely. If you don't know about that, it's select all. So Control A, Control C, Control V. In fact, maybe I should put something about that because I forget not everyone knows about Control A. Yeah, that would be really annoying. Anyway,
your tool's dumb, man. Error 99.
It's a great tool in that you don't have to answer any questions. So the other blurb tools that create back cover copy, a one paragraph pitch, and a one sentence pitch, you have to answer questions like who's the protagonist, what do they want. The advantage of those tools, and those still are there, is that you can use those tools before you write the book. And you can even use it as a tool of testing to see if you think this book would be interesting for readers, right? You're like, I've got this idea. Is it a good book idea? You can go into the tool and see if the book back cover copy and the pitch is the kind of book you would want to buy. And you can even test on friends and see if it's the kind of book they would want to buy. Really great for that. And you can also use it for a book you've already written. But if you've already written a book, you may not want to bother with that. You may just want to copy and paste, Control A, Control C, Control V, or Command if you're on a Mac, and then push a button and it just spits out a back cover copy and a 1-paragraph pitch and a 1-sentence pitch. And so that's what Book to Blurb does. It uses an entirely different model. So it's running off of Gemini, whereas the other tools are running off of Anthropic. So you're going to get very different pitches using the different tools. The reason Book to Blurb doesn't run on Anthropic is that Claude 4.0 still has a context window limitation where it can't ingest an entire book without vectorizing it. So what's nice is that currently I'm pulling the entirety of your book into context for the purpose of creating this book blurb. So you get a pretty accurate blurb. You're welcome to play around with it. I've gotten some really encouraging feedback. It is really difficult for me to test it myself because if I test it on books that I've already read, AI has also already read those books. And so I don't know if it's actually reading the blurb, the text or not, and giving a good blurb. I test on my brother's book, but it works best if you test it on an unpublished book. Do tell me what you think. If you play with it, you can find that at authormedia.com/patron toolbox. And yeah, enjoy.
So this is one of my personal favorite stories because I still can't believe it happened. The fantasy author Kate Sager, who left AI prompts in her book, has doubled down on this. A reader pointed out and did screenshots, and she threatened to sue the reader. And, I mean...
it worked. She got the reader to pull down the screenshots.
The screenshots are gone. But the backlash was so bad that Seeger had to delete her Threads account, left a passive-aggressive Instagram post behind her. And, I mean, this post is fair use, although it does depend. This is an ARC. And if you post screenshots of an ARC, I can see how there might be some issues. I mean, it's not contractual. So many of us authors are not treating this like a business. If you really want to prevent your book from being shared around like that in ARC form, make your beta reader, ARC reader sign a contract of some kind.
Okay. If she had been following the novel marketing method for publishing a book, this never would have happened, even if she was using AI, because as I just released in our episode last week about how to publish your book, you finish the proofreading before you send out the ARCs. You don't send out some rough, non-proofread version. This was an error that any human reader could have caught. The proofreader, a copyright, or a copy editor, even a beta reader could have caught this. And this is really a failure in editing, and it's on the author for failing to edit the book, either herself or to use other humans. So sure, use AI tools. If it makes your book better, readers prefer better books to worse books. If you're going to leave the prompts in there, though, it's kind of like failing to pull the curtain back on a stage.
Yeah, or so if a prop falls in or the boom mic shows or something like that.
It kind of shatters the illusion. It was like, oh, wait, this was written by a person using tools. And it becomes a little bit less magical, right? You got to keep all of that behind the curtain to enhance.
There's a reason magicians don't share their secrets, right? Because the whole point is the suspension of belief. And if someone is immersed in your story, and suddenly they get to a part that says, sure, let's go ahead and recreate that in the style of Bill Watterson and whatever. Then you've just brought the reader out of the story, which is the actual crime.
And well, that was one of the crimes, taking the reader out of the story. But the more fundamental crime, and I feel like we're ending every episode of Author Update on this, is she was failing to love her reader. If you love your reader, you don't threaten to sue your reader. Right.
Let me think about that for a second.
I know it's a big stretch, but your reader is your customer, and the number one rule, or the number one commandment of book marketing, and the 10 book marketing commandments, is thou shalt love your reader as much as you love your book. And she was not loving her reader as much as she was loving her book by threatening to sue the reader. She was also so that's kind of the moral argument, but also the pragmatic This is how you market your book, by loving your readers and treating them well. But also from a pragmatic perspective, she doesn't understand the Barbara Streisand effect. So we would not have been talking about this story if she hadn't have threatened to sue her reader, because this is going to be an every week story.
Oh yeah.
40% of authors are using AI, and the leaving the AI prompt in the book is a really easy mistake to make, because if you're doing a lot of copying and pasting, even if it's just for an edit, the AIs tend to chatter a lot at the beginning and the end of the useful bit. They kind of have to ramp themselves up and get their context sorted out. And in that chatter, it's easy for that chatter to wind up in your book if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And so the Barbara Streisand effect, if you're not familiar, Barbara Streisand had a house on the coast. And California, the way the law works is that the actual coast belongs to everyone. So you can't actually own a portion of the beach. The beach is public, but you can own land back from the beach. Well, somebody did a project where they went up and down the California beach taking pictures of all the houses. And he took a picture of Barbara Streisand's house and posted it on the World Wide Web, this newfangled contraption. And this image was viewed 6 times, 2 of which were by Barbara Streisand's lawyers. And they sued this guy for posting a photo of her house. And now her house is, as a result, her house became one of the most famous houses. So in an attempt to silence this thing on the internet, it just caused it to spread. And there's a saying that trying to get content off of the internet is like trying to get pee out of a pool. It's tricky, and it just keeps spreading beyond you. And one of the best things you can do is just not bring attention to it. And
exactly.
So,
don't go on a worldwide, please respect my privacy tour. Like, that's just not the way to do it, guys.
So we'll leave you with this, and Jonathan may have some final thoughts, but I really want to encourage you to really work to maintain a heart of love towards your reader. It's really easy to fall in love with your book, and your book is your baby, and you just love it so much. And you start to make decisions on behalf of the book, and you forget about your reader. But your reader is your customer. Your reader is the only eternal being that really matters between your book and the reader, right? The book is going to burn, but your reader may or may not burn. Your reader will persist. Your reader is an immortal human, right? Your reader is really important, of inestimable value. And so I encourage you to love your reader and to keep your reader in mind as you're writing your book, as you're editing your book, and as you're marketing and promoting your book. And if you keep your reader in mind with a heart of love, you'll find that all of those steps get easier. You'll become less afraid. The decisions will get easier to make, because now it's not a question of what you want. It's a question of what your reader will want.
There's a phrase that we like to use in Baptist churches now, which is, everyone wants to be a servant until they get treated like one. And there's a big ego hit. You say you're serving your readers, you say you're doing this for them, you say you're doing this for them, and then they call you out on one of your mistakes. How do you react? And it takes discipline. Sometimes you got to grit your teeth. There's a concept in the Marine Corps, okay, called there are no individuals. There are no individuals in the Marine Corps, which is why we seem like we're all exactly the same. Because we all react exactly the same. It's kind of weird to us too. It's like, wow, we really are programmed. But when you're in boot camp, you're not even allowed to say the word I. You don't say, I need to go to the head. You say, this recruit, because you don't matter. What matters is, and they told us this, you are a vehicle that carries the M16A1 weapon system to battle, and you bring it back. It's serialized, you're not. And the point is that the mission matters more than you do. And the idea that authors get to where a reader attacks them, it leaves a 3-star review, which popped up again. I've been attacked. I can't believe this is happening to me. I've worked so hard on this book, and I just wanted to put it out there for everyone to read, and now no one likes it, and now I'm depressed, and now I'm. You need to drop that attitude. Your whole purpose is to satisfy and delight your readers, to give them something throughout the day that they need, and not to serve yourself. Too many authors think they need to be appreciated like the geniuses they are. And I'm sorry, your Portal fantasy isn't even unique. It's just like every other Portal fantasy. So maybe back down the ego a little bit. And what is unique is loving your reader even when you feel like they're taking shots at you. And that's a very biblical thing. That's like the core of Jesus's message, is to love your enemy, do good to them that hate you. If someone, maybe they don't even mean to take a shot. I mean, it's all text based on the internet. There's just so little context with it. They probably didn't even mean anything, bad by it. They weren't malicious. And yet you're reacting like it is. Guess what? Now no one really wants to read your stuff.
And this becomes a competitive advantage because most authors are writing because they want status. They want to be a published author. They want to have their name on the book. And you can always beat that kind of author, almost always beat that kind of author, if instead of chasing status, you're motivated by love. It really is a competitive
I mean, look at the
advantage.
difference between Patrick Rothfuss, which everyone thinks is a jerk, George R. R. Martin, whom everyone thinks is a jerk, and Brandon Sanderson, the guy who has the least use for the status that he has. Like, he's just a nice guy. He really is. And I think his writing's kind of bland, but the people really like his work.
He got attacked with the most vicious hit piece I've ever seen an author get attacked by. It inspired an entire episode of Novel Marketing on how to deal with hostile media interviews.
I remember that one.
And his first reaction because he posted to the Reddit because everyone's freaking out, and he's like defending his readers. He's like, "You are not a loser for liking fantasy." Like, even when he was being attacked, his love for his reader was his like guiding light.
Yeah.
And it caused his readers to love him even more. In fact, it triggered the like nerd defensive status that like all nerds who were bullied in school like would gang together, right? And like this hit piece didn't work. It caused his fans to love him even more. So I encourage you to love your readers, and I also encourage you to come back next week for the next author update. These are at 4:00 Central Time every Friday on the Novel Marketing channel. We also post clips to the author update channel, which I encourage you to like. If you haven't already, we have a link down in the description. You can click over to that channel. We're trying to get more likes over there. So do like both channels. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr.
And I'm Jonathan Sugar.
Live long and prosper.